Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Face Tattoos, because nothing says you're friendly like letting strangers draw on your map. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Monkey Shine Beer. Pick up a six-pack and let the monkey spank you with Monkey Shine Beer. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're film guys. We work behind and front of the camera, always got projects going on, and we like to look at movies, not just for their storytelling, writing capabilities and what we can learn on that level just as fans, but also what we learned on our own sets and how we're seeing that reflected in other films and all the cool stuff that goes into making movies. All of that we try to tease out while we're discussing the film. And I really appreciate, and I've said this a handful of times throughout our 265 episodes, how like 90% of our show is really about the movie. Like we don't go into these weird comedic tangents that really aren't funny for 10 minutes, and then we come back and make a point and then go on for another on a 10-minute tangent. Like so many shows I listen to really aren't talking about the topic that's in their whatever subject line. It's just them trying to crack jokes, which is fine. I'm just not that kind of podcast listener. I want to listen to a thing and hear more about that thing. I guess I'm a bit nerdy in that way, but I love what we do. I love that we're every episode. I thought we would run out of things to talk about, but every story is its own universe that's getting at something. It's approaching in its own style. And I feel like if nothing else, that should be a really big flair about your own creative process. Whatever you're working on is its own universe. It doesn't matter how much it looks like the other thing that you made. This is a new thing, whether it's the same client on a new product or even a refresh on the same product. Like every single thing you're making should be its own universe, and with its own rules and your own fresh approach to it. And that's going to help it live on its own so that you keep finding creative inspiration no matter what you're working on. Every single time, just thinking about, okay, what is this one trying to be? I don't care what the last one was. What is this one trying to be? And how can I make it be the most of what it's trying to be? What's your creative process like?
I mean, so a lot of times I think that I don't really have anything to say, and I'll sit down and I'm just like, okay, I try to not look at it from the point of view of I want to sit down and make something, because if I do, then I never will, because I don't always want to. Sometimes I feel the calling of my room and I want to come back here and like write something, but for the most part, I don't have that feeling. And it's been a learning process for me to understand that I need to just do it and make a habit of it. And if I don't turn it into a habit, then it doesn't get done. And that's okay. It's okay to not feel the pull to do something and just do it anyway. In fact, if you look at a lot of the greatest sports, professionals or, greatest anybody, they did stuff when they didn't want to, even if it was stuff they loved, like Kobe's a great example. I'm sure he didn't want to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to practice every day. Maybe he did, but he did it anyway, and he did multiple practices a day. So, it's been a learning process for me to just, to understand that I'm not always going to want to create, but to do it as a ritual rather than something that I only do when I feel like I have something to say. So,
It is nice to be able to force yourself to sit down and say, okay, you know what? I don't know what I want to say. I don't have anything to say, but I do know I want to create, and to go through that process anyway and find a way to. There's times when I've had that as a writer where I'm like, I know I'm trying to work on something and the idea just isn't quite there. I'm going to write something anyway that's completely opposite of whatever I'm trying to do over here. I'm going to do something that I have no emotional investment in, And whatever that is, it's fine. It can be crap, or it can be fun. It can be lazy. It can be inspired, or nothing at all. Like, it doesn't matter because I have no emotional investment. And then you crank out something, you're like, that was really fun. I have no idea where that came from. And now, you punch the keys, right? It's just, you get in there and suddenly the juices are flowing. You have some momentum, and you can carry that into whatever it is you're trying to do. Just as a creative exercise, finding a way to force yourself into create something right now, whether it's, meant to be something big or not, that's okay. Just get that rhythm going and remind yourself that you can still do this, even when it's hard, or whenever you feel like you're done, you've exhausted all the possibilities. You haven't. There's still so much more to say. How many songs are there with a guitar and a singer?
Yeah. I mean, it's when they say that everything's been done, they're not wrong. It has, but not by you.
Not by you.
I think I recommended that book last week. What was it? The Art of Creativity. I forget even.
Yeah.
And by Rick Rubin, and in it, it's so freeing to look at art and the creation of it as letting go of it being defined as a defining measure of who you are as a person, or a creator, or validating your existence. I think that for a long time I did that, and I still do, to a point. If I create something and I put it out there, in my soul, I'm feeling, I hope people like this because this is an extension of me. It's not. It's literally just a moment of who I was in that moment, or something that my subconscious wanted to say. I mean, if you think about it, we're 90% subconscious. It's only 10% of our conscious being that is here and present and talking to you right now. But like 90% of you is what's internalized, and we have to allow ourselves to let that out, like, somehow. And it's so hard to remind ourselves that we have so much in us. We're like an iceberg, there's so much below the surface. And if we don't just stop our conscious mind because our conscious mind sits on top, it's like the what is it? The turgor pressure, or whatever it is, the viscous pressure, the little film on top of water that stops the water from overflowing out of the glass. That's our consciousness. And the subconsciousness is all the water beneath. And if we don't break that, then we can't allow that to flow out, what's beneath to flow out. So we have to just turn it off. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to do, because you have the external world telling you all of these things, especially nowadays, social media and everything. You have to shut everything down and be okay with it and welcome that. And when you do, it's kind of like, there's like a dopamine hit when you're able to do that. I mean, you're a writer yourself. Like, when you get into those modes where you can't write fast enough, where it's just flowing out of you and you don't know where it's coming from, how cool does that feel?
Yeah. I mean, for me, in my small beginnings here, it's one of the most amazing things, to see the entire world, and it feels like you're cheating.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Like, someone else did this, right? I'm copying someone. I just don't know it yet. And it just all is right there. It's just right there. And those are some of the most incredible moments, for sure. And it's great to get to those, but obviously you can't rely on those moments if you're going to try to make a living as an artist. That's where you get to once you, like you said, once you break that little surface tension area. But that's the work. That's where the real work is. The inspiration that comes out of that, that's the cake. Like, that's what you want, but you can't strike oil if you don't start digging.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, great.
Yeah, just full of them today, Todd.
We can just have a podcast about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We should.
So you would think by a certain time we'd seen all the action that you could possibly see, right?
Yeah.
And so, because it's February, the month of love, we thought it only appropriate to cover what?
So today we're covering Zack Snyder's 300. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause it, go watch it. We're going to spoil stuff, I guess, if you don't know history. Yeah.
Probably. There's something in there, I guess. Yeah, we'll look at a handful of things. It's a very simple film. There's not like that much going on below the surface, but there are some things, and certainly a lot to think about and chew on. So we'll look at some of the cinematography, slow motion, some story and writing, dramatic effect, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. King Leonidas of Sparta and a force of 300 men fight the Persians at Thermopylae in 480 BC. It's directed by Zack Snyder, screenplay by Zack Snyder and Kurt Johnstad, and Michael B. Gordon. Based on the graphic novel by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley, cinematography by Larry Fong, featuring Gerard Butler as King Leonidas, Lena Headey as Queen Gorgo, Dominic West as Theron, Vincent Regan as Captain, Michael Fassbender as Thelios, Andrew Tiernan as Ephialtes, and Rodrigo Santoro as Xerxes.
You have many slaves, Xerxes, but few warriors. It won't be long before they fear my spears more than your whips.
It's not the lash they fear. It is my divine power. That I'm a generous god. I can make you rich beyond all measure. I will make a warlord of all Greece. You will carry my battle standard to the heart of Europa. Your Athenian rivals will kneel at your feet. If you will but kneel at mine.
You are generous, as you are divine, O King of Kings. Such an offer only a madman would refuse. But the idea of kneeling, it's, you see, slaughtering all those men of yours is, well, it's left a nasty cramp in my legs, so kneeling will be hard for me.
There will be no glory in your sacrifice. I will erase even the memory of Sparta from the histories. Every piece of Greek parchment shall be burned. Every Greek historian and every scribe shall have their eyes put out and their tongues cut for their mouths. Why, uttering the very name of Sparta or Leonidas will be punishable by death. The world will never know you existed at all.
The world will know that free men stood against a tyrant, that few stood against many. And before this battle was over, that even a god king can bleed.
Todd, Bubby, tell me why this movie is so great and why we love it so much. Explain it.
All right. Well, let's get a few things out of the way, first, before we start talking about why this movie is so great. All right. So first off, anybody who thinks they're going to come in getting a history lesson needs to check themselves at the door, because almost none of this movie is accurate.
Well, I would say, if in terms of movies based on history, I would say the approximation of this is probably more accurate than most movies that proclaim to be factious. Just from the standpoint of this happened, and a lot of the things that happened, are reported to have happened. Now, this is from Herodotus, which you would think, he's kind of sketchy. Sometimes he's really reporting what he's told. And so I don't know how much of that he's parsing for fact. And maybe that's kind of a widely contested thing, but it's not like this happened 1,000 years before Herodotus. He was born 4 years before this happened. He was born in 484 BC. And so he was barely alive, but that would mean whenever he became an adult, there were still people around who lived through that moment. And so a lot of the stuff, the past is largely, to me, it looks pretty accurate from what I've, whatever Googled. And so the broad strokes, there was a betrayal that led the Persian army behind them. And so the broad strokes, now you get into the specifics. I don't know if there's magicians throwing magic bombs or whatever, but
yeah, I mean, okay. So when I say that, I mean like they obviously had armor. They weren't shirtless.
Right.
You know, the Spartan culture was very not as free as they pronounce themselves to be. When they say free
Right.
Sparta,
Fair. Yeah.
they mean a select few, and everyone else were basically slaves. And, you know, women obviously had no rights, like almost nobody. It was a rough culture. Let me just say. Okay.
That's
So
fair.
when they
Yeah.
say free Sparta, yeah. So there's that. The Persians obviously weren't monsters in the way that they're portrayed. Xerxes was not a giant, you know, like
He's a tiny guy.
and yes, there were select group of 300, but there were more, right?
Thousands
The
more,
Athenians were part of this.
Mhm.
There was the group that he met, you know, with those men.
The Arcadians. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there were like 700 of those guys. So there were more men than that. So anyway, I just want to get out of the way that like yes.
And then on top of that, just while we're pounding on them,
yeah,
he goes on, you know, at some length to Ephialtes, King Leonidas does, about how they fight and as a phalanx, as a unit. And then 90% of the movie is them just kind of roughing, you know, just going haywire on people, like not as a unit at all.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Anyway, and there's other things. So I guess I just want to call out the fact that like it's kind of
liberties, a lot of liberties here.
Well, I think just the hardest thing is that like it kind of idealizes the society, and that's the biggest thing to call out. Yeah, there could be things. There is a lot of stuff that is accurate, like when they would send their young kids out into the wilderness when they were little, but Leonidas wouldn't have been one of them. They wouldn't have sent the prince out, you know. But most like children who are going to be part of the I guess you want to call it military, would be sent out, you know, that kind of stuff. Like that did happen, but is a really rough society that kind of is fantasized a little bit. And so just wanted to call that out. That being said, I'll never forget the first time I saw this movie and how I just wanted to go punch a wall at the end of it, and how there's something, and maybe it's just because I don't know, I'm a guy. I don't know a whole lot of women who like watch this movie and think, oh yeah, 300, this is awesome. But just the concept of full and total sacrifice to something that is bigger than you without question is inspiring to me. And there was never a moment in any of these guys where you thought that they questioned anything that their king said or did. And even when Leonidas had his moment in the bedroom with the queen, and he was talking to her and he was concerned, quote unquote, it was more of a concern of, did he do the right thing by bringing Sparta to war? It was never a concern of him dying or him leading men, you know, and actually it wasn't even that. It was more about like, how could, you know, the ephors say no, you know, how could the oracle say no? Like, we need to go into battle, you know? So there's just no question. Like, it just is, you know? And I feel the same when I watch films about war today. Like, they're hard to watch. Obviously, I wish this kind of stuff didn't exist in the world. But knowing that there are people out there, and today there are people out there, I mean, you know, anybody in the military, like SEALs, Green Berets, like they just, there's no question, you know, they just go and they do. Is just like so inspiring. Just knowing that you have a trajectory, you are going to do something no matter what. I mean, we did Fury, or we're going to do, we did Fury.
No,
That was just
next week. Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to do Fury. Like, that's just, there are some examples of some films where I'm just like really inspired, that there is a whole nother tier of when you submit yourself to something that's bigger than you. And that feels good to me. Like, it feels like I'm part of something bigger when I submit myself to something that's bigger than myself. And these guys had it, and they were just a group of brothers that were never going to leave each other's side and were always there. And there were so many examples throughout the fighting scenes where they would help each other, save each other. And they were laughing during it, and they were having fun while they were slaughtering everybody. And it was like, it could have been, it could have been anything else. It didn't have to be just straight murder. It could have been any other kind of movie, but to see that camaraderie of these guys, it didn't have to be guys, just like individuals, supporting each other in the craziest environment, is just inspiring. It still is. And I really love how the changes that, like, okay, obviously I don't think the Queen spoke in front of the consulate, like in real life. Probably not. That's my guess. Maybe, but probably not. But her story is also super important in this film. And for the writers and Zack to make that part of the story, I think was like super important. So it's not just these 300 who are fighting here. It's also the Queen who's fighting for him back in Sparta, and doing terrible things because she felt like she had to get them to support the king and go to war. It's just really inspiring film in that regard.
You're right. Like it didn't really dawn on me until you're talking about it, but that sense of unity, there is no dissension, in his ranks. It is all incredibly supportive. We don't get a lot of that as guys, in our culture, people talk about whatever toxic masculinity and that kind of thing. And this is such a good image of what guys really want and what we really appreciate when we run into it. This is why we love sports, is because it's all about unifying, and coming together with one common goal and doing your part. We were able to accept when we're the quarterback and you get some of that glory, but we're also able to accept when we're a lineman. We're there to protect our guy and take the beating for him. Like, we appreciate all those roles, and we're all able to step into those things without a lot of, complaining, and seeing that reflected in a movie, in a story that is much more primal, and also the stakes are so much higher than a game.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a great point. That reminds me of the main reason why I love this film. The main reason, and I don't know why I overlooked it, is that Leonidas, yes, he's king, but he is no more important than any other man that stands next to him. And we are reminded of that constantly throughout the film. He reminds them of that. At the end, when he's dying, it was an honor to fight next to you, sir. It was an honor to have lived next to you, or honor to die next to you. Honor to, every time I've seen that movie, I'd tear up when I see that. It's so good. I cannot watch Gerard Butler in any other movie. This is the first movie I ever saw him in. And every movie since, I'm like, all I see is King Leonidas. I don't see anyone else. I'm sorry, but that's the epitome of just a great leader. And I've looked for that, in the work that I do, in my jobs, I have bosses, you know what I mean? And I look for leaders. I look for people who I am, and I try to be that leader. So, if I have people who are under me, who I manage, they're not under me. We talk, I ask them for help. They ask me for help. Whatever they need, my goal is to give them what they need to do their job. You know what I mean? And if they need help or something, or they need time off, or they need I want to be there and help them. I want to be there for them. That's my job. I'm trying to emulate King Leonidas in my little day job. You know what I mean? But I'm also looking for that above me. And we have too few of this. We have too few of the leader standing next to you instead of above you. And it's just so beautiful to watch something so barbaric, and so just barbaric is the best word. But at the same time, so collected and calm and even keeled. Yes, he's directing everyone, but everyone is also directing everyone else. You hear who's his right-hand man. I forget it, the father, the captain. Yeah. You hear him directing at times. And then you hear Leonidas directing at times. He doesn't step on the captain and say, no, I'm going to do. No, everybody is equal because they all know they're all going to the same place. The same thing is going to happen. And he marches with them into battle knowing he's going to die. He doesn't hang back because he's king and he's got to live. And, no, he's part of it. Anyway.
And even when he goes to Xerxes, like he tells him, like, you should be hoping I die. That would be a good thing, because then, we're at war and then our people are saved through my death. Like, that's a good thing. Like, and then of course, and what I also love about that scene is you have to tempt your hero with a way out that
great point
will help reinforce they are committed, not because they have to be, but because they want to be. And so giving him that moment of, you can have everything. You can be the king of my armies or whatever. And everyone is going to bow at your feet, and, you'll have anything you want. And to be able to be tempted with that. And of course for him, it's no temptation, but we need to see that he's rejecting those things in order to feel good about what he's doing and why he's doing it. Because now you can really trust in, what he's saying. It's because he's had other options. And so the little moments like that pay off a lot, just the same as, him, doing the whole wolf thing and being thrown out. Like, we need to see that as well, of course, so that we see him from beginning to end as an equal to everyone else, as someone having earned the right to be called a Spartan. And so we never doubt. And even at the beginning, we go through that whole opening sequence, assuming this is any Spartan. It's not until that sequence ends that, they tell us, and that's our King Leonidas, and so that way you're kind of filling in this boy's experience with every single Spartan's experience, because they are all equal. Yeah, it's so good. Like, for a movie that doesn't have that much going on, like, there's maybe 3 subplots. The main plot being, just the fight at the pass, Thermopylae. And then the other ones, you mentioned the queen with the council and Theron, and then Ephialtes, being the one who betrays everyone. And then Thelios is outside the story, telling it to prime the army for war that, gets kicked off at the end. And this whole story is an inspiration for them, fighting the Persians. And that's really it. And those 3 stories we only kind of just glance at, like we dip out in order to give our guys time to stack bodies or get surrounded. Like, we're really those are just spices that help add context and stakes to the story, and also, to reveal why certain things are happening, why the army isn't there, why aren't they getting backup? Well, the queen's working on that. Why are they getting defeated? Well, that's Ephialtes. So let's explore that and just understand who he is, and we understand so much better who he is through that opening sequence when we find out they kill any misfits. And therefore you see someone who wasn't killed. What is he holding in his heart? He's holding hope that he could be a part. And then when he gets rejected, and that little sequence is so good, because whenever Ephialtes learns why he cannot fight, right? Because he can't raise his shield properly. That's such good exposition, because for one, we're learning how a phalanx works, right? We're learning right there through the teaching of Ephialtes, which is also where we get his motivation for betrayal. Like, it's all tethered and tied in. It's so neat. Very, very neatly told story for a movie that, gets really close to 2 hours of runtime. It's pretty tight. Yeah. And then, of course, because of the way that's all laid out, from everything we've learned from the very beginning about what makes the Spartan up until that point where Ephialtes is getting rejected. We know why it's happening to him, and we don't blame Leonidas because it wasn't an insult. There was nothing insulting about the way Leonidas treated him. It was all about being strategic and practical and making, this is a king, a general commanding his army and making decisions that impact his war. And that has nothing to do with Ephialtes and everything to do with his battle.
He touched him. He said, and I imagine in 400 BC, there, someone like that who I don't think he was that disfigured, but in real life, but I imagine he probably wasn't ever touched even, he touched him. He said, "I'm sorry, my friend." He called him a friend. It's a great point that he wasn't insulting about it. He gave him, if you want to help, this is how you can help. He even gave him a way to help. It just wasn't what Ephialtes actually wanted. So yeah, great point.
It is so good. And the best burn of all, of course, is at the very end when he tells him, "Oh, may you live forever."
Oh my God. What a great line. I mean, seriously, what a great line.
Oh.
In so many ways. Like that's so layered. It's an insult, but he does love him. There is love behind that, but there is also like betrayal, and I hope you get everything that you wanted for doing this. Yeah,
and that you live forever remembering what you did to us. Like it's all there. Yeah. It's all there and without being explicitly stated. And that makes for such much better writing. And I got to think adapting this movie had to have been, I don't want to call it easy because it's not. This is a wildly difficult movie to make. But on the front end, pretty easy. Like it's a graphic novel. And I don't know if this came out as a single graphic novel or it was issues and then later compiled into a big graphic novel. I don't really know how that stuff works. But if it was issue based, even better, because every single issue is kind of giving you a great moment to end on, right? That's how any commercial break happens, is a really good thing that's going to keep you hanging on through the commercials so that you watch and they get their ad revenue and then brings you right back to the story. So you have to end before a commercial break on a high note, on a mysterious note, on a good, catchy note. And comic books got to operate on the same, principle of, I got to buy the next issue. I got to see what happens next. And you have that operating through an entire story for you already. It's built. And then on top of that, you have just, 100 pages of storyboards like laid out for you. Take your pick. Which ones do you want to use and bring to life? Now, that's the easy part, having like 75% of your storyboards already laid out for you. The hard part, of course, is realizing those things because comic books, wildly difficult. Like they're stylized and they're comic books for a reason. And it's because you can draw anything in the world. You can't film anything in the world. And up until, around this age, the mid 2000s, it was still really, really hard to realize certain things. And for him to go through that pre-production and figure out how do we achieve some of these ideas? And some of these shots, the explosion with the shield, shielding him, and he spins around and he gets the shield up in time. And who is that? Fassbender. And he's got this great expression and he's flexed. Like that's a wild shot and it's freaking awesome. And it's very much what we call the rule of cool, where, does the story need this? No. Does the experience need this? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's cool. And I don't know if there's been a better movie that takes advantage of the rule of cool. Probably not. I would struggle to find one better.
And that executes it in a way that like makes it good. Instead of like broy or just like, doing it for the sake of doing it. Like it feels like a movie like this, it could get away with, it just gets away, it almost needs that in a way. You know what I mean? Like imagine if all of them had armor on. So much less cool.
So much less cool.
Right.
We need him flexed at the end of massacring like 15 guys in a row. Like he just power poses with his freaking everything out. Like he's got quads popping, he's got his abs ripping, his bulging biceps, and it's just like, I don't know if this qualifies as homoerotic, but it's certainly pushing the boundaries.
Well, and okay, this is also going to address something that I wanted to make sure that we talked about, which is not the homoerotic aspect, but the I guess how do you put it, the broiness, or the just kind of like, oh, they all have their shirts off, and oh, they're all buff and whatever. I guess the toxic masculinity that some people would call this. And I want to point out that for someone to look like that, it takes so much work. And I don't mean like, for 6 months. I mean like for a long time. You have to be completely dedicated. And yes, I know there's airbrushing, and I know there's strategic lighting, and I know that there's color in the back end and all that stuff. And all of that was done. I get it. But these guys had to be in amazing shape. They're not a love handle in sight, not a pooch in sight. In fact, they're all probably sub 10% body fat. And it's incredible. The effort that each individual man and woman, I guess, but man in this film had to go through in order to be in a shape like that, which it feels accurate as well, because it feels like their entire life, when they meet the Athenians, or whatever it is, not the Athenians, but the Aeolians, or whatever, whatever. When they meet those guys and they say, "What's your profession? What's your profession?" Spartans, "What's your profession?" Hooah! Like their whole lives are dedicated to fighting and to being, which makes them fit, which makes them like, have those abilities. And I just think it's an incredible feat. I know you agree as well, to do that. And so calling that out as like toxic masculinity, just, I feel,
that misses the target, I think, as
completely.
Well. Because that it also probably served a really good acting, aspect of putting these guys all through their boot camp together to get ripped. They're watching every single person's diet individually to see, do they need to add weight? Do they need to subtract fat? And that's all fine tuned. And you go through that together. That can't help but show up on screen through your performances.
Yeah.
Like there's utility there. They're all miserable together.
Yeah.
And, that's very useful in so many ways. I don't know. This was one of the few stories I remember studying in high school history because of how much it stood out. Like there were aspects that I haven't heard people talk about. And that's the kind of thing where I'm like, I grew up in a small town in Texas. So how much was my English or my history teacher just kind of adding sauce versus like this was what was in the actual, Herodotus telling it, what we know about Spartans. But some of the things like they didn't get to really ever see their wives. Like they would go home at night in the darkness, and that's when they got to, have sex with their wives and produce kids. But their whole lives were centered around fighting, and that's what you did. That was your profession. And then learning about, Thermopylae and all that happened there. So whenever this movie came out, I knew so much like from that history class that I was walking in just super primed and surprised. I think in my mind, the pass was much narrower. It was like 2 to 3 person abreast is what would get through. And that's how they were able to, take out quote unquote 1 million. I think they've estimated that closer to like 100 or 200,000, which whatever, anything north of, 50,000 people is outrageous. But yeah. And so I was just surprised in so many ways of what may have actually gone in. And at the time, I think because it was in pop culture, there was a lot of like History Channel documentaries coming out and you're learning this and that. But I don't know. Did you remember studying this or learning about this in high school or junior high? No.
No, I wish I had. I mean, everybody loves an underdog story. The idea of 300 men or a few hundred men going up against 100,000 or 500,000 or whatever is unfathomable. Like, how do you, but, fighting smart, not hard, or smart and hard, no, I never heard that. But the moment that I did, I was intrigued just like you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't study it.
My God. So going back to the rule of cool, like slow motion throughout the entire film, like you said, it works because of everything we're talking about. Like, it's the style of the film in and of itself. And there are moments that if this were another movie, you would be rolling your eyes. And to some degree, Zack Snyder's pushed that boundary in his later films, where it's like, it's just not working the way it did in this movie. But it works so well. Like, the moments that really don't need it, but because it's this movie, it works. The messenger coming on his horse and pulling out skulls. And as we cut out of that scene, we do this wide shot of him rearing back on his horse with skulls in hand, dangling, and it's super slow motion. And it's just this big dramatic thing. And it's so cool. Like, that moment didn't need that. We could have just entered the next scene. But why not?
And the coolest, to me, the coolest slow-mo shot of the whole thing is when Leonidas comes out fighting, and they do the speed ramps of him fighting, where he'll like chop somebody's leg off really fast, and then it goes back to slow motion. And then as he's falling down, he'll like slice him in half or something, and then it goes back to slow motion. And then when he turns around and hits the guy with the shield, and like it goes really fast and then pauses right there. Unbelievable use of that. But if we hadn't had it throughout the film, that might feel out of place. So like just taking these moments to make it maybe feel bigger. So like the horse slow motion one, totally not needed. But the thing that I noticed about that shot is that the horse is rearing back. He's holding the heads and stuff, and he's like, the Persian guy is just, the messenger is like trying to be bigger than life, and then you have the two Spartans just standing there right in front of him.
Stoic.
Not stoic, just not reacting at all. And I think that says a lot. And so maybe he did slow motion so that you could maybe have a few seconds to take that moment in. I don't know, but
good point.
Not needed.
Not needed, but no, I think you're right. Creating a style for the film itself allows for some of these other highly stylized moments to feel natural and not feel forced. And that's a big thing. I mean, the color itself, right, is super stylized. At times you're like, I'm not even sure I'm seeing skin tones anymore. Like, it's just,
it's so desaturated.
It's so wild. And, the slow motion in this film works really well because like the messenger getting kicked, down, this is Sparta, and then he gets kicked. It's so beautiful. It works because of all of his long robes, and it gives a lot of flow and motion when slowed down. Whereas if he didn't have all that wardrobe on, it's just him, slowly falling. And there's that extra motion gives context to this being slow. Like having still things whipping around, like gives you a sense of slowness that you take that stuff away and it loses its sense of slowness. And that what I've had to tell my actors before on set is when we're shooting slow-mo, I was shooting this on film. Like I was shooting like 75 frames a second. And on a 16 Super 16, that's not a lot of time. Like we need to be
too.
Yeah. And so like I tell everybody, here's what we're doing. You're gonna, run down these stairs, and they're stairs. Like it's in a park, so these are like concrete stairs, and so they need to be a little cautious. And I'm like, don't go so fast that you feel in danger, but you need to be going quick. And so we set the shot up, and I start rolling. And again, 75 frames, that's money rolling right through the frame. And they start going, and they're kind of going. And I'm like, I start kind of not like screaming at them, but just, urgently telling them, hey, faster is better. The faster you move, the cooler it looks. The faster you move, the cooler it looks. And then they started just flying down, still safe, not like, oh, I'm going to trip and like kill myself. But getting that sense of, okay, now the faster they're moving, you can see their hair start to move differently. Their clothes start to move differently. Even the way their bodies, adjust to each step, you can feel it all whenever it gets slowed down back to, a third, 33% of the playback speed. And so that is in place. This whole film is making sure things are going to their top speed so that when we move it down to slow motion, like you get a sense of what does he call it? A sense of things. And that moment you're talking about where they're ramping in and out, there was an interesting breakdown. I don't watch a ton of whatever that show is. Our friend Joe Howes loves the show, The Corridor Boys or something like that. But they do kind of a quick breakdown of that sequence, and it looks like there's like 3 or 4 cameras that they're using all at once. A longer lens with a wider lens, another lens camera that's probably on like a dolly, because they do that all in one single, what feels like one shot, where he launches the spear and we follow the spear into someone's chest, and then we come back to him and we're just whipping around, and so match cutting between cameras and ramping in and out of speed. And that's so much work to figure out how to do this, especially when you're, again, shooting on film. Like, there's probably a lot of trial and error that goes along with that. And I can just imagine how fun and chaotic and exciting it was in pre-production, figuring out how are we going to do this.
Did they shoot this on film?
I assumed, 2006. I don't know that they would have been doing whatchamacallit's digital.
It's so much CGI.
It's so much CG. So much blue screen. I saw a snapshot of some BTS and it was just all blue screens everywhere.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's so intense that it's probably easy to buy into the reality of what you're doing. Let's see. 35. They shot this on
amazing
Kodak. Yeah. Just freaking insane. But this whole movie is built around drama and dramatic effect. Like early on when they get to the pass and they're seeing that someone else was there, and that, right before they discover the immortals were there, Leonidas sticks his spear in the ground, right? And it's just a crack of thunder and lightning, echoes from him putting his spear in the ground. Like, we don't need that, but damn, is it cool?
Yeah.
And same thing, like some of the simple things they do to help enforce the drama, like when the captain's son gets beheaded and that horse comes out of, from the smoke, that if you're paying attention, you see it back there lingering. And so whenever we cut back, and it's one of those kinds of things that I think everyone probably sees it because you're searching the background and then you see in the smoke, wait, is that a horse back there? And then you see the urgency in the father's eyes as we cut back. The horse is in full gallop, and we're like, oh no, his son's about to get killed. And then the head comes off this kid, right? And he falls to his ground. Everything with his son is framed without anyone else. It's clear of other soldiers.
Yeah.
Right. Even though the battlefield isn't clear yet, because the captain immediately goes on a blood rage, right? Where he just slaughters like 10 guys in a row. Mm-hmm. But you clear the frame in order to add emphasis to this kid, to give a sense of safety, and then also a sense of, failure, that this kid got killed when he didn't have to. It just draws attention and focus in so many ways into the drama of this moment of this kid getting his head taken off. It's just really beautifully executed.
And it's such a good way
intended.
to humanize these guys too.
Yeah.
Their fathers, their sons and their fathers, and to have the captain bring his own son along, and for Leonidas to say, you don't have to do this. And he's like, nope, he's good and strong, and he wants to come. I have others to replace him. Well, this is a moment where he can actually say, because at that moment you kind of don't identify with the captain. You're like, okay, I don't look at my sons like, if I had multiple sons, I wouldn't look at like, oh, I've got more to replace him. Yeah. But then later on, when he does die and he comes, and then the captain comes back after grieving, and he says, I never told him that. What was it? I never told him that almost like he was my favorite or something like that.
He
Basically,
made me proud. He fought with honor.
yeah, something like that. I just never told him, and it just humanizes the captain more. It makes us realize, oh, this could be any one of us, and his reaction when that happens is so. I mean, I could almost how amazingly not fun necessarily, but cathartic would it be to play one of these characters, to play the captain or to play Leonidas or any of these guys where you could just like take out any kind of emotion, like when his son dies and he reacts like that, that feels natural. That felt so freaking real, so real. And in so many other films, it would have been underplayed, like, because there is this idea of like underplay for the camera. And I think that a lot of times, especially nowadays in films nowadays, you should do that. Overacting is a real problem, but in a situation like that, it is not possible to overact, and he didn't let anything go. I mean, he just, he didn't hold anything back. And it was just it felt real, in that moment.
Yeah. Wonderfully done. Like, every film is its own universe, and understanding that allows you to go to a level 10 in your emotions whenever you need it. They can be stoic when they need to be in this film, and that adds so much contrast when they let loose. Like the amount of posing that doesn't feel like posing, where it just feels honest, is pretty remarkable. That's really good acting. To see Gerard Butler baring his teeth and screaming, like, that's such a pose. But because of his performance and the context, it doesn't feel like a pose. It feels like a primate who found his way into civilization. Like, it's amazing. I love it. It's such an efficient film, and I really am impressed by that. To have these quick subplots that bounce in and out, and gives so much more room to breathe for the action moments. Like, you have to be so tight and concise with some of these moments in order to allow whatever a few 5-minute action sequences, because those start to really eat up time and space, and yet they still find ways to let the audience think and engage with the film. Like, even a god king can bleed, right? That's what he says at the end of his meeting with Xerxes, where he's telling him, no, he doesn't say you're wrong, but he says you're wrong. Everyone will know that few stood against many, and that even a god king can bleed. And of course, whenever he makes his final stand and he throws his spear and he cuts the Xerxes' face and he's bleeding, they never repeat it. They never say, see, told you. Like, they just let you think it on their behalf. And that's an opportunity for the audience to engage with the film. That's what I mean by that, is let the audience think what you're saying without you having to say it. And they have several of these moments, even though there's several other moments where they don't, how many times do we hear them say the immortals will put their name to the test? Like, probably 2 or 3 times. And that's fine. Like, it's still fun, because why not? We're about to see a bunch of guys get slaughtered. Let's dive a little bit more into their psyche of what they're doing, and what they're thinking as they're doing it. Because that first guy gets killed right as he's saying, I think, will put their name to the test. And you can kind of read that in. Now, Leonidas doesn't say it. This is the narrator, Thelios, as he's narrating everything, which is another thing. Like, right? Narrating is tricky about when to use it versus when not to. Several films use it when it's like, you don't need narration right now. All you really need is to let the story speak for itself. Here, it's really useful. It allows us to get in and out of sequences so much faster, in order to keep the story tight and contained, even though the narrator often isn't really telling you something brand new. But he is. It's necessary, for one, because he's actually talking to an army, and it's useful as a device, again, to keep the story tight. And it helps us, I guess, emotionally engage with what isn't being said by the soldiers. Now, they would have been making a mistake if they were doing both. If they were constantly having the narrator jump in and also having the characters say what the narrator is saying. That's really not great use of narration. But to find it useful is to use it whenever things aren't being said. And now you want someone to step in and add a little context or add some emotional depth, because these guys are so stoic most of the time. It's nice to be told, the one guy who isn't, going crazy with everyone else is Leonidas. And I love that scene where the storm is striking all the ships. I mean, it's beautiful, and it's fun to see these guys just losing their minds and acting like savages, being savages, I guess, more accurate. But and then see Leonidas like just poised. Yeah.
And a great example of that is the scene with the E4s, right? So Leonidas climbs the mountain to go see the E4s, and he's standing there, and he wants to go to war, but he knows he can't like kill them or defy them or whatever. He just has to basically take it, and you can see the frustration on his face. But it really helps to have the narration calling these creatures, like diseased and like
monsters, basically.
All these names and stuff because they are gross and they are terrible, and we know that, but we want to know that also Leonidas knows that and thinks that, and so he's basically narrating Leonidas's feelings without Leonidas being able to say them. Yes, he's acting them, but hearing them also cements it in our minds that Leonidas knows this is total BS. Like, this sucks, So that helps for sure. But I also love the fact that the narrator is in multiple places throughout the film. First off, when we at the very beginning, when we hear the narrator, we just think, oh, this is a narration film. Okay. All right. There's a voice of God, right? We don't know that it is this messenger who's gone back to speak to the council, right? And then to get Greece to go to war. And then at the end, he's speaking to the 100 or the 30,000 Greeks that are standing there about to have that final battle. But he changes he changes where he is, like throughout the film. And I love that we find that out throughout the film. Our journey, it's not just a journey of the 300 to Thermopylae. It is a journey, yes, but it is also this journey of getting Greece to go to war, and then this journey of them finally being at war a year later, and we're going on this with the narrator, and it's a wonderful completion, to the film, to see them running into battle.
It really is,
and he got us there
and I think the other thing that makes this film so resonant for like us is seeing the principle at play here. Like, they're doing it despite it being not because they're going to die, but despite they're going to die, and they take pride and honor in that, because the reason they're there is on principle. There's the principle, to not take my country needlessly into war, but putting your money where your mouth is, right? I mean, we've heard it 1,000 times over the last, 20 years. Like, how nice would it be if, leaders of a country were the ones who went into battle? We'd probably see a lot less battle these days, a lot fewer wars. And to see someone who's saying, yes, this battle needs to be fought. And like you were saying earlier, like, I'm not above anyone. I'm not going to just send people into their deaths. I'm going to show that the principle is strong enough that even I will step in, and everyone adhering to this to a fault is really satisfying, because there's so much dignity and honor in that. And that's, gravitational pull for dudes.
Yeah. And I love the moment, by the way. And I think you talked about the scene where he says, it's after the first battle and they're just like going around killing everybody, whether it's laying there on the battlefield. And he says, pray that they're that stupid, pray that they'll kill me. And he's like, he takes a bite of the apple. Besides, there's no reason we can't be civil. As they as the captain kills one of the guys who's just wounded on the battlefield. It's just a great piece of writing that also humanizes them. Again, adds a little bit of lightheartedness to a really just brutal scene. But they're kind of like, there's these moments of them having joy while winning, yes, joy while slaughtering, but while winning, and joy while doing what they do best, which in this case is battle. And to have a few moments of lighthearted, just like a single moment of lighthearted laughter is just really, really great. Anyway,
I love it.
I mean, honestly, it's such a good popcorn movie for me. I just absolutely, more than a popcorn movie, I guess. I think for a long time, I'm just gonna really enjoy this every now and then.
It's nice. Yeah, it's hard to. You get to watch this and mentally check out. And you can just kind of be and exist. It doesn't ask a lot of you. It asks a tiny bit of, of you. But for the most part, it's really just providing a lot of energy, a lot of, inspiration, if you want to call it that, and fun. It's just a fun popcorn movie. This is the epitome of a popcorn movie. And that's okay. This is probably around the peak of Zack Snyder for me, like between this and Dawn of the Dead. I don't know that he's climbed those heights again. I really liked Watchmen. I know that's not everyone else's favorite, but that really worked for me. Otherwise, I'm rooting for him. I'm going to keep watching this stuff, but I keep wanting to see something else. I don't know.
I agree. I just love how he threw himself into the world, didn't try to recreate the world practically, and he just went to it's one of those scenarios where I love that the whole thing is CGI, because the entirety of it is CGI. I mean, maybe the dirt is not CGI, but everything else absolutely is. And it's from the graphic novel, so why not make it look like a graphic novel? Why not have some of the things they do be ridiculous, like when Thelios jumps into the air, 10 feet into the air while the guy's about to whip him and cuts his arm off. That's ridiculous. No way that could happen. Or when Leonidas is climbing to see the Ephors and he jumps to the next handhold climbing the mountain in his cape. Or the fact that there's a giant hole with no gate or anything, fencing around it in the middle of Sparta. Just
Don't
a
fall in
giant
there.
hole. Yeah, just okay. Well, there are children running around here, right? Dear God.
The weak ones don't survive.
Yeah. What? Of course. Why not? Just go all in. I don't think that most movies could do that. And this one does it, and it does it super well. So yeah. I don't know.
Super well. Nice. I think that's about all I have.
Me too.
What are you going to recommend this week?
Okay. This week, it's weird. It's not a film, it's a show, but I've lost a lot of sleep this week watching this show. I'm going to recommend Love on the Spectrum on Netflix.
Wow.
I randomly put it on. I watched something, and then afterwards I was like, okay, I need to decompress or whatever. And I just randomly put it on, and it is so beautiful. I just the next day, after watching a few episodes, I was talking to Jenny about it, my wife, and saying how I was crying at some moments. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And it just reminds you that everybody wants love and everybody needs love. And there are these moments where I'm thinking, I want to be more like that guy. And I don't in a lot of ways, and, but in a lot of ways I do. And how really at our core, we just want love. And it's just beautiful. And for 3 nights in a row, I just kept watching and kept watching and kept watching. And it's not anything special. It's not good cinematography or anything but when you talk about reality shows and how bullshit they are, this is super real. This is like, you know, I mean, you can't have these people, you can't tell them to do something. Like they just are how they are, you know? And it's so weird because there's so many awkward moments that you or I would be like, oh my God, this is so awkward. This is not working. And then, like there's this, I'll just really quickly, there was one interaction where this guy he's super on the spectrum and he just talks a lot. He won't stop talking. And he's on a date, his first date with this girl, and she has Down syndrome, and she is barely talking. And you're sitting there thinking, this is so awkward and so weird, that the things he's saying or whatever. And then he asks her if she's having a good time, and she says, it's the best day of my life. Like all of a sudden, you would never have thought it. And it just hit me for some reason. Like we expect so much from people. Expect like, you know, I'm doing this for you. What do you think? Or I do. And to have this beautiful young lady just all of a sudden say it's the best day of her life. And she had barely said a single word the entire time. Like, oh, you know, they don't expect much. It was just beautiful. Anyway.
That's a pretty good sales pitch.
Okay. I just it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm crying in bed. Like, you know, my wife's laying next to me and I'm just like, oh my God, you know, trying to cry quietly, watching Love on the Spectrum. Oh man. So good.
Okay.
Anyway, which is so weird to recommend that after 300.
Yeah,
I know, which is kind of why I recommended it, I guess.
Nice. I'm going to lean back into 300 and recommend a Japanese film. It's called 13 Assassins. If you like this whole small group against, you know, all the big bads, 13 Assassins is right for you. It's about, you know, 13 unemployed Ronin or whatever, samurai, and they're there to bring down like a big bad guy. And so, yeah, very classic. I don't know, kind of a Seven Samurai kind of thing, but modern. This is 2010, so a few years after 300. Yeah, all the vibes. Yeah, so if you're looking for something that like, man, I could use a little bit more 300, but in a language I don't speak, then this one, go watch 13 Assassins. I'm sure it's probably streaming somewhere. Nice.
Peacock, I think. I just looked it up because I want to watch it.
If you stay tuned for next week, we are going to be taking a look at Brad Pitt and Fury, the World War II tank movie. And so, yeah, I'm sure that's streaming. Where is that, on Netflix or something right now?
Yeah.
Nice. So take a look at that. We'll cover that next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note if there's something you want us to talk about. And if you want to comment on this episode, tell us, I don't know, show us your war face. You can do that at the pestlepodcast.com/300.
And our quote of the day, this is, I'm going to try to read this. It's like, yeah. Anyway, is from Herodotus. Yeah. Thank you. It is better by noble boldness to run the risk of being subject to half the evils we anticipate than to remain in cowardly listlessness for fear of what might happen. So essentially, is that like it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I take from it, is he's saying it's better to run into the danger you're anticipating than to sit back in fear of what could happen if you do that in the first place. Like, it's effectively what we talk about all the time with creating your art. Like, man, it's so much easier to do nothing. It's always going to be easier to sit on your ass and think about what might have been. You know, that's the Napoleon Dynamite. You're like, I could have went all the way. I could have went pro. I bet you I could throw this football over those there mountains. And you know, it's so much easier to do that than to go fail. Like, failing sucks, man. But that's the process. That's what you do, and it's better. Like, and this is the thing that bothers me so much about modern culture is you're on display all the time. You know, people use this word cringe, and I freaking hate it. It's such a cynical view of the world that tells you it's so much better to not risk being vulnerable. Because if you're vulnerable, you might look stupid and it might make people cringe. It's like, you coward, you filthy piece of shit. How about you stop judging everyone for what they're trying to do and trying to be, and you step up and you show us something. Like, so much of the world, so much of the internet is based around mockery. And it drives me nuts because it's so much easier to tear something down than it is to build something. So screw that, step up and face your fears. Yeah.
I've heard, I think it's buffalo. When there's a storm coming, buffalo run into the storm. They don't run away from it. And the reason is because they run through it, essentially. Because if they ran away from it, they would just be in it for a lot longer. So instead they run through it. And it goes by faster. And I've always thought, like, that's such a great metaphor for, things in your life. I mean, not everything. If some things are just hard and you want to avoid them, I know. But in some cases, it might be easier to run into the storm, or to address the issues, coming at you. So, yeah, great quote. I mean, it's heavy-handed word-wise, but it's
right.
Quote.
Yeah, it's definitely old school stuff. And the one quote of this film that's always stuck with me, not just because it's really damn cool, but it's really reported to have been said on the battlefield, which was that line from Thelios, which was our arrows will blot out the sun, then we will fight in the shade. Like that
was really said.
That is what was supposed to have been said in actuality. Yeah.
Wow.
Like the poise. Now I assume he didn't say it in English.
Yeah.
But you know what? If this is what it's gonna be, then this is what it's gonna be. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Charge the storm. I dig it, man.
Yeah. Amazing. Charge the storm. That's there you go. We're gonna end on that. That's a perfect mic drop moment. All right, thank you guys so much for joining us. This was so much fun. I can't believe it's taken us 265 episodes to do 300. We should have done it on 300.
Yeah,
I mean, come on. God, super fail.
So close.
Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts, share us with your friends. It all helps. And if there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart, please share. We'd love to hear it, and maybe one day we'll do it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.